Last week we took a look at how to reproduce an effect found on the iTunes Store, and it's that these pieces of album artwork here sort of stack on top of one another responsively as the window becomes smaller. And that's a pretty cool effect, but being that they stack up on top of one another, not on all devices, all screen sizes, and in all situations, is it fair to make each one of these a separate hyperlink? So I promised you guys that this week we'd take a look at how to use the state button to make these work together as one hyperlink. And if you're using the latest version of Adobe Muse that give us these responsive features, you also have the ability to animate your rollovers and to do a sort of subtle fade to your rollovers. So the effect being that all of these work together as one hyperlink, but watch this, as I roll over, see they kind of roll, they animate, they fade, but one after the other, and I think it's a really cool effect. And they're functioning as one hyperlink, so we don't have to worry about people clicking in the wrong spot, even though they're separate images. So let's go and take a look at how this all works. We're going to use a few features here, and there's a good chance you'll learn a couple of tricks that you did not know if you're just getting started with Muse or if you haven't dug too deep into my tutorials. So this one's going to be pretty jam-packed. So the first thing that we need to do is take a look at what we have here, just for those of you especially who didn't tune in last week. We've got a bunch of little pieces of artwork, and essentially they're set to not resize, but because this is a responsive document, their position gets adjusted responsively as the window gets smaller because it's a fluid width page. That being the case, they obscure one another, and we don't necessarily want them to all be separate hyperlinks because they'll be in one another's way a little bit. So what we're going to do is group them together, but not using a group. We're actually going to use a feature, and it's a widget. It's a built-in widget called the state button. And if you go to the widgets library, you'll find it in the buttons folder, and everyone's got this. It's called state button, and it doesn't really look like it does much of anything. And what it does look like it does is something we don't want. We don't want a new button. So I'm actually going to delete it. I'm going to use something that I've set aside for myself called the empty state button. And essentially it's just the container that lets you drop elements in to work together as one link. And when I drop that in there, it's just an empty little box. For those of you who don't have this, feel free to go get it from museresources.com. It's a free download. If you go to museresources.com and go to the library widgets page, and then go down to the buttons area of the page, it's right here, empty state buttons. So you can download that, keep it in your library. It's a free little download, and it's just to save a little bit of time. So basically, we've got this little box here, and you want to remember where you put it because it's going to disappear in a moment when I click away from it. But just remember where this target area is. I'm just keeping it down here in the lower left-hand corner. And I'm going to now go and shift-click all of these pieces of artwork to highlight them, get them all selected. And then I'm going to drag so that my cursor lands where that little box is. And it's very hard to see, but that box is showing up when my cursor gets on top of it. And when I drop it, they all become part of this state button group. So I'm now going to click away and click back on it so you can see that they're behaving now as one object, as if I grouped them together. And you'll notice that the state button sort of sizes itself. It got way bigger. In fact, it got a little too big, and I'm going to tighten that up a little bit around the artwork so that way the boundaries match. The other thing I want to be sure to do is make sure that the state button is going to flex, because up here under resize, if it's not responsive, if it's set on none, we're going to lose what we had, and the artwork is no longer going to slide on top of one another because that box that is now containing the artwork is rigid. So we want to make sure this is on responsive width or stretch to browser width. Either one should give you the result that you're looking for, but I'm going to preview in the browser and make sure. Okay, so it looks like we're good. But what will happen, this happens every time, is the artwork will go out of order. These boxes are no longer stacked the way I want them to be stacked. It's close, but not quite, and it's because this one isn't on top. If yours is in complete disarray, then you can do what we did in the previous video. Select the one on the right, Shift-Command right bracket to bring to the front, Shift-Command right bracket to bring to the front, and just go from right to left in my case, because that's how I put the shadow, so that the top one would be the one on the left. And we're just going to bring to front all the way across. For those of you who are on a PC, it's Shift-Control and the right bracket instead of Shift-Command and the right bracket on the keyboard. Or you could do a right click and bring to the front that way. So one thing to know also is that this state button, because it behaves as a group, the first time you click on it, it selects the entire container, and the second time you click on it, it goes inside the container and selects one of the objects inside. So just know that some of the time I'm clicking once to grab the whole thing, and some of the time I'm clicking twice to go inside. I'll try to mention that as I go along, so that way I don't lose you guys, because it's hard to tell, especially because I don't think you can hear my trackpad clicking. Cool. So now that I've got all these things grouped together, they're going to work together as one hyperlink. So I just clicked away and clicked back on this once to select the entire state button. And this is where you're going to set your hyperlink. So I'm going to link it to the albums page, for instance. So the whole thing works together as one link. The thing is, we need to set the rollover style for each of these in order for it to actually do something. Because if we preview this in the browser, even though it's now one button and it's going to function the way we want it to, it's not animating yet. There's no rollover actually taking place, which makes it look like it's not interactive. You get the little finger, which shows that you can click on it, but it doesn't really tell the user, hey, click on this, there's something here for you. Plus, we wanted to get that cool 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 animation going from left to right, as I had my example. So the way we're going to achieve that is I'm going to select each one of these individually. So I click twice in the state button to get inside. I'm holding shift and clicking all these to get them all selected. And now I'm going to go up to effects. And I'm going to go to the third tab on effects, which is called glow. And I'm going to turn on the glow, and I'm going to make sure that it's an inner glow. And in doing this, I'm basically covering the image with a color. And I've chosen black because that's kind of my theme here. Now the thing is, before you hover over the artwork, I don't want this to show up. I don't want to see this yet. I only want it to go dark once you've hovered. So I'm going to set the opacity to 0%, but the blur as high as it will go, which is 250. It won't go higher than 250 because we want the glow to sort of fill the entire box. So the idea here is the glow has to be turned on for the normal state and the rollover state in order for it to animate. If we have it turned off for the normal state and we have it turned on for the rollover state, it's not going to animate. It'll still work, but it won't animate, so it kind of ruins all the fun. So we need to make sure glow is turned on for normal and glow is turned on for rollover. We just are going to make it not show up by doing 0% opacity for normal. So it's going to go from 0 to whatever. I think I'm probably going to go to 30% of that black overlay here. So now that I've got this established, I've got to go and increase it when we rolled over it. So I'm going to click here where it says normal. I'm going to go to rollover, and I'm going to go back over to effects. I'm going to go back over to glow, and I'm going to bump up the opacity to, I'd say 30% in my case. So now it goes to that slightly darkened 30% black overlay. And we haven't really animated it yet, but we might as well preview it in the browser to make sure that that works, because if that didn't work, then we can't go any further. There we go. Good. So it's working. They're all happening at the same time because, again, the state button is making them all work together. It triggers the rollover state at the same time for everything. So now, here's where it gets pretty fancy. I'm going to click twice again, and I'm going to do the shift click to get all these selected again. This is where the fun and the magic happens. I'm going to click on normal. I'm going to make sure I'm on the normal tab, and I'm going to expand transition, which is the feature that's new in the latest update to Muse, where we got those responsive features. And I'm going to turn on fade. That's what's going to make this animate. It's instead of just snapping to black, it's going to fade in black. Now the delay is how we're going to make each one come in slightly later than the previous. So we can't really set the delay with all of them highlighted, otherwise they'll all still match, and we want them to go one after the other after the other. But the one thing I do want to match for all of them that I want to change now is that I want the duration to be 0.4. And you guys will notice I'm still on the normal tab, and you might be thinking, well, aren't you trying to animate the rollover? And the truth is, when you're setting up the transition, if you set up the transition on the normal tab, it applies it to all of the other tabs. So we're actually saving time here by doing it on the normal tab. If you do it with the rollover tab selected, you have to go and do it again for the normal tab. Otherwise, it'll fade on rollover and then not fade back to normal when the mouse moves away. So I recommend setting up your transition on the normal tab and then setting up the difference stylistically on the rollover tab or the mouse down tab, etc. So stylistically, we've already got it set. We are just now playing with the animation because we already had it get darker for all of them on rollover. We did that first. So now that we've got the overall duration established, now I've got to go and click away and just get my first piece of artwork on the left-hand side selected. And I'm going to go back there and I'm going to set the delay to 0. Then the next one, I'm going to go back there and set the delay to 0.1. And then the next one, I'm going to do 0.2. And so on and so forth. So bear with me. I'm just going to do each one of these here without any cinematic magic, no fast forward or anything like that. So I'm just going 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, etc. And for my duration, I did 0.4, so it would be a nice slow fade. But you guys can play with that. You don't have to make it 0.4. I mean, really, you don't have to do anything exactly the same as I'm doing it here. But now we've got all those delays set. So essentially, it's going to trigger the rollover at exactly the same time for all of these. The rollover properties just so happen to include a delay. So it's not going to animate immediately, which means it's going to go one after the other after the other. So there we have it. And when we roll away, it does the same thing with the same delay, but backwards. So that is how that works. It's that easy. It's done. It's just a matter of getting these in a state button and setting up our rollovers with those transitions and with that delay. The state button is a pretty powerful thing. Hopefully I'll come up with some other ideas of how we can implement that in future tutorials. And then I also promised you guys, I mean, for those of you who wanted to take from that what you've taken from that, feel free to close the video now. But I also promised you guys that I would mention how I got this, this artwork to fade away and for the text to fade in. And that's using a widget that I sell called Move for Muse. And you can go to moveformuse.com and get that. But I want to show you guys real quickly how I actually made this happen. And it's really easy to use for those of you who have Move. I know a lot of you guys have downloaded it already. I'm really stoked on how many people have gotten it. What I've done is I've put the widget itself on the master page that all of these pages are linked to. And for those of you who aren't familiar with master pages, next week I'm going to have a tutorial on how to take full advantage of master pages. But the idea is because this is on a master page, it becomes part of every other page that that master page is applied to. And in my case, this master page is applied to every other page. So really all it's doing is taking this and slapping it on every page. So the way these widgets work, by the way, if I go to my library here, because I've got it installed, I've got, let's see, where are you? Move for Muse. Here we go. So what I want this to do is to appear automatically on page load. Essentially, I'm having a black box appear and the text appear. The black box happens to be at a low opacity, so it doesn't cover up the entire photo, and the text happens to be on top of that. The black box is there to make the text more readable. So the idea is once I've got this dropped on the page, I can go into the settings and I can type a graphic style name. So I just named it Fade. You can name it whatever you want. You can name it Music Fade Stuff. You just want to make sure that you remember what you wrote here because you're going to have to use it again when you apply a style to those other objects that you want to fade in. And I've told it to fade in, and I've told it to do so with a duration of 2 seconds and with a delay of 1 second. So now that I've got my settings established and I've got that master applied to the page, and again, you don't have to have the master applied to the page. You can just drag the widget straight onto the page where you want to accomplish the animation. I've now got a black box and a text box. Really, nothing fancy going on here. Just a black box here, which is set to a lower opacity of fill, and a text box on top of that. So you can see here, I've got the opacity of that black fill set to 40%, and I've just got a regular old text box on top of it. Now where the tricky stuff is taking place is that I have a graphic style. There's a panel in Muse called Graphic Styles, and when you're on the Graphic Styles panel, you can hit this little New button, and when you click the New button, you get to name a graphic style in order to reuse the same style over and over again. But the side effect is that the graphic style goes into the code that Muse produces, and my widgets talk to that code. The Move for Muse widgets talk to that code to make the animation happen. So remember how we gave a name to this animation? We named it Music Fade Stuff. We got to use Music Fade Stuff as the name for a graphic style in order to get these two connected to one another. So Music Fade Stuff. You don't have to give it a long, stupid name like I did, but it's really up to you. And then I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to give this one the same style, Music Fade Stuff. Now the thing is, and I want to point this out because you'll notice that this box just got darker. When you use graphic styles, the idea of the original idea of a graphic style is to repeat the same style over and over again. So being that I have a faded black box, when I applied the graphic style to this text box, it made it a faded black box. But even though I have this graphic style applied, doesn't mean I can't make a change to the visual style. So I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to get rid of that color fill. I didn't want a color fill in the first place. The graphic style stays applied, so it's not going to mess up our animation. So really all we have to do is have some objects with the same graphic style name applied and the widget with the same graphic style name typed in. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what Move from Muse gives you, you can trigger these animations on scroll, you can trigger them when the page loads automatically, on a delay, whatever you want. It's really flexible. It comes with 7 different widgets. And when you go in here, there are all these different animations to choose from. I just happen to be doing a super basic fade because I think it's subtle and elegant. So I preview this in the browser now, and because I've got my graphic style set and I've got my widget set to the same name, there it is. The fade takes place. It's that easy. If I wanted these to fade at different speeds, at different times, I could just drag the same widget in twice, use a different name for a different graphic style for each one, and boom, they'll behave independently from one another. And it's not messing with any of my other animations on the page. So it's really cool. For those of you who are interested in that, go to movefrommuse.com. You can do a whole heck of a lot of stuff with it, and it comes with 7 widgets, and they're all included for $20. So the feedback's been really good. People are stoked on it, and I appreciate all the positive feedback that you guys have given me. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please subscribe if you haven't already. I've got more cool stuff coming soon. Next week, we'll talk about working with master pages, because I know that being that we dipped into it here, a lot of you are saying, wait, I haven't really used those yet. And I'll deep dive into those next week. So see you next week.